Even if you know absolutely nothing about fashion, there is one name you've almost certainly heard: Chanel, a perfume bottle that became more famous than some Hollywood stars. Tweed suits that every fast fashion brand has copied to death. Bags that somehow double in price every few years, even as the quality doesn't. A brand that's over 100 years old but still treated like the holy grail of high fashion. But here's the thing, it wasn't always like this. Behind the polished logo, the perfect campaigns, and the dreamy boutiques, there is a story that includes poverty, orphanages, strategic affairs, Nazi collaboration, lawsuits, comebacks, and a very long list of very powerful, very controversial men and women. So in today's video, we're going to unpack the real history of Chanel, from Coco herself and the way she rewrote women's wardrobes, to her work with the Nazis, to Karl Lagerfeld's chaotic, campy reinvention of the brand, to why, in recent years, people have started asking, is Chanel actually kind of mid now? Let's get into it. Our story doesn't start in a glamorous Parisian salon. It starts in a town called Saumur, France, on August 19, 1883, when a girl named Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel is born into a life that is anything but luxurious. Her mother is often sick, her father is usually gone, traveling around as a street vendor. Stability? Not really on the menu. Even her name comes with chaos. On her birth certificate, her last name is misspelled as Chasnell. That tiny bureaucratic error kind of sums up her early life: unstable, overlooked, and barely taken seriously. When Gabrielle is just 11 years old, her mother dies, and her father, he doesn't step up, he disappears. Gabrielle and her sisters are sent away to a convent orphanage run by the Sisters of the Sacred Heart in Aubazine. Life there is strict, cold, and repetitive. It's not warm and nurturing. It's more like rules, prayers, chores, repeat. But this grim environment gives her two things that will define the rest of her life. She learns how to sew. She becomes obsessed with simplicity: clean lines, black and white, strict shapes. That minimal, almost severe aesthetic that would later define the Chanel look. It's born in a place with stone walls and nuns, not marble staircases and perfume counters. When she turns 18, Gabrielle leaves the convent and tries to build a life for herself. She moves to Moulins, works as a sales assistant and seamstress at a shop called Maison Grand-Père during the day. At night, she performs as a singer in small cafes and cabarets. Was she a great singer? Not especially, but she had presence, she had ambition, and she had this one song. One of her regular numbers was supposedly called Qui qu'a vu Coco. People start calling her Coco. Others say the nickname came from cocotte, slang for a kept woman. Either way, she holds on to it, because Coco sounds a lot more like a brand than Gabrielle from the orphanage. While performing, she meets Etienne Balsan, a wealthy heir whose biggest job in life is having a chateau and connections. Coco becomes his mistress and moves into his estate. From there, her life changes completely. She gets exposure to the French upper class, aristocrats, officers, rich friends of rich friends. She studies how these people dress, move, talk. She absorbs everything. She's not just going to be in the room. She's figuring out how to own the room. Around this time, Coco starts designing hats, not as some big business plan, but as a side interest. Women's hats at the time are absolutely insane. Huge, overloaded, covered in feathers, flowers, lace, whatever could be glued on. Coco hates this. She famously questions, how can a woman think clearly with such a thing on her head? So she starts making hats that are simple: wide brims, clean shapes, maybe one ribbon, one feather. That's it. At first, her designs are mostly seen by Balsan's social circle. But then something big happens. Gabrielle Dorziat, a popular French actress, wears one of Coco's hats on stage in 1912. Suddenly, Chanel's hats are not just for rich friends. They're for the whole city. In 1910, with financial help from her next lover, an Englishman named Arthur Boy Capel. She opens her first boutique at 21 Rue Cambon in Paris under the name Chanel Modes. It's just hats for now, but it's the beginning of the Chanel empire. By 1913, Coco and Capel moved to Deauville, a seaside town where the rich come to relax. She opens another boutique there, this time not just selling hats, but clothing, and this is where she quietly drops a bomb on women's fashion. At that time, women's fashion is still stuck in the past. Corsets hobble skirts, literally restricting how far you can walk. Layers and layers of heavy fabric. Coco looks at all this and basically says, absolutely not. She starts using jersey fabric, which up until then is mainly used for men's underwear. It's soft, stretchy, and comfortable, not exactly high fashion material, but Coco turns it into striped sailor tops, simple dresses, sporty outfits women can actually move, breathe, and live in. She even uses her own family as walking ads. Her sister Antoinette and her aunt Adrienne walk around town wearing these relaxed Chanel pieces, acting as living billboards. The reaction? Traditionalists are scandalized. Modern women are obsessed. It's casual. It's chic. And for the first time, it's fashion that respects women's bodies and daily lives. The magazine Harper's Bazaar writes in 1915, "The woman who hasn't at least one Chanel is hopelessly out of fashion." Chanel isn't just a brand anymore, it's becoming a movement. By 1916, Chanel is big enough to open her first couture house in Biarritz. She hires around 300 workers, launches her first haute couture collection, and solidifies her aesthetic. Uncluttered silhouettes, softer lines, shorter skirts. Nothing too stiff, nothing too heavy. At the same time, jersey fabric, which other designers still ignore, becomes her secret weapon. It's easier to get during World War I, it's more affordable, and it drapes beautifully. The business does so well that within a year she pays back Boy Capel's initial investment. She then buys 31 Rue Cambon in Paris, a building that becomes Chanel's flagship, housing a boutique, salons, studios, and Coco's apartment. It's still Chanel HQ today, and yet her designs are not just about comfort. They're controlled, almost severe. Boxy jackets, clean lines, black and white contrasts. She's taking the visual language of the convent and turning it into Parisian chic. While other designers are still obsessed with corsets and exaggerated curves, Coco moves in the opposite direction. In the late 1910s and early 1920s, she introduces wide sailor-style pants, beach pajamas, for women lounging sets that look shockingly relaxed for the time. Trousers on women are still considered borderline scandalous. Pajama-style outfits are considered private garments, but wealthy women start wearing them at resorts, and Chanel quietly redefines what is acceptable. She also becomes a visual icon herself. Short bobbed hair, slim androgynous figure, clothes that blur the lines between menswear and women's wear. This fits perfectly with the garçon, the tomboyish, independent woman of the 1920s. Chanel is not just dressing this new woman, she is this new woman. Her lovers also shape her brand. One of them, the Duke of Westminster, inspires her signature tweed suits. Another, Arthur Capel, influences her use of jersey and tailored structures. When Capel dies in a car crash in 1919, Coco is devastated. She wears black for years and later says, "In losing Capel, I lost everything." That grief eventually transforms into one of the most iconic fashion ideas in history, the little black dress. In 1926, Coco launches a simple, straight black dress. No frills, no lace, just pure line. Vogue calls it the Chanel Ford, the idea being that every woman will have one, like the Ford Model T. Black, which used to be the color of mourning or servants, becomes the color of chic minimalism. Around the same time, she collaborates with perfumer Ernest Beau to create Chanel No. 5 in 1921 to 1922. At a time when most perfumes smell like heavy florals or sexed-up musks associated with fallen women, Coco wants something modern, clean but sensual, abstract, not just smells like a rose. For independent women, not just wives or mistresses, she chooses a formula full of aldehydes and expensive jasmine. Ernest Beau hesitates because of cost. Coco famously says, "Then put more of it. I want to create the most expensive perfume in the world." The bottle is just as important. Sharp, simple, almost like a lab bottle or a whiskey decanter. No frills, just the name and the number. Number 5, her lucky number. She then partners with the Wertheimer brothers in 1924 to mass produce and distribute the perfume under Parfum Chanel. They get 70%, she gets 10% and a name license. Later, she will call Pierre Wertheimer the bandit who robbed me and fight for decades to reclaim control. That fight will become very messy during World War II, but we'll get there. In the 1930s, Coco pushes into new territory, costume jewelry. At first, the rich only want real gems. Fake jewelry is seen as cheap, tacky for people who can't afford the real thing. Coco flips that idea. She mixes fake pearls with real ones, big, bold necklaces with simple suits, cheap materials with rich styling. She famously says, "Jewelry is not made to give women an aura of wealth, but to make them beautiful." Because her clothes are relatively understated, these dramatic accessories create balance. It becomes acceptable, even fashionable, to wear fake pearls if they're Chanel. She also begins working with Hollywood. In 1931, MGM producer Samuel Goldwyn invites her to dress film stars. It doesn't become a massive long-term shift, but it plants a seed. Chanel and cinema will be intertwined for decades. She also embraces the camellia flower, which becomes one of the brand's key motifs. You'll see it on dresses, brooches, packaging, everywhere. Simple, graphic, instantly recognizable. At this point, Chanel is at the peak of its first golden age, and then comes World War II. When Germany occupies Paris in 1940, Coco makes a decision that will follow the brand forever. She closes most of her boutiques, laying off around 4,000 women. Officially, there's no market for couture during the war. Unofficially, some say she uses the war as an opportunity to retaliate against workers who had previously gone on strike demanding better pay and hours. She moves into the Ritz Hotel, which during the occupation is also crawling with high-ranking German officers. There, she enters into a relationship with Hans Günther von Dinklage, a German officer believed to be a Nazi intelligence agent. Evidence uncovered later shows Coco had a German intelligence code, name a registered agent number. She already held strong anti-Semitic views, but she also sees a business opportunity. Remember Parfum Chanel? She wants it back. The Wertheimers, who own the majority and are Jewish, have fled France and preemptively transferred control of Parfum Chanel to a non-Jewish businessman named Felix Amiot to protect the company from seizure. Coco writes to Nazi authorities claiming, basically, "I'm Aryan, they are Jews, the business is abandoned, I deserve full ownership." She says she has suffered prejudice for 17 years because of that contract and wants her wrongs corrected. The Nazis, however, don't hand it to her because the legal structure the Wertheimers set up holds. After the war, she's arrested and questioned by the Free French authorities, but no formal charges stick. Many people believe Winston Churchill, who knew Coco socially through English aristocrats, quietly helped protect her. Publicly, Chanel's image is damaged. Privately, the Wertheimers and Coco will eventually make a deal that makes her extremely rich. After the war, Coco leaves France and spends several years in Switzerland, essentially in self-imposed exile while anger simmers about her Nazi connections. From there, she tries to attack the Wertheimers again, claiming the number 5 they are selling isn't authentic anymore, and attempting her own perfume ventures. The Wertheimers decide it's easier to buy peace than fight forever. In 1947, they renegotiate. Coco receives a large lump sum for wartime profits of Chanel number 5. She gets 2% of all Chanel number 5 sales going forward. They also agree to pay all of her living expenses. In exchange, she shuts down her rival perfume activity and gives them full rights to her name for fragrance and cosmetics. This deal makes her one of the richest women in the world for doing, at that point, relatively little work. But by the early 1950s, something is bothering her. Fashion is now dominated by men, especially Christian Dior, whose new look is all about tiny waists, full skirts, hyper-feminine silhouettes. Coco hates it. She thinks it's a step backward. Women squeezed back into structured armor after the freedom of the 1920s. She comes out of retirement in her 70s and says, essentially, if men are going to dress women like decorative dolls again, I'm coming back. In 1954, Chanel reopens her couture house in Paris, funded by the Wertheimers. The French press is not kind. Many haven't forgotten her wartime choices. They find the collection conservative, old-fashioned, too similar to what she did decades earlier. In the U.S., the reaction is more divided. Some see it as refreshing compared to Dior's exaggerated glamour. Others think it looks dated. But Coco keeps going, and instead of chasing trends, she quietly builds what we now recognize as the Chanel uniform. In 1955, she updates an old bag design and launches the iconic 2.55 flat bag. Features that seem obvious now were radical then. A shoulder strap so women can keep their hands free. Quilted leather for structure. Multiple compartments inside for lipstick, money, personal items. Around 1957, she introduces the two-tone slingback shoe, beige with a black toe. It shortens the foot, elongates the leg, and goes with almost everything. Add in the tweed suits, the simple black dresses, the pearls and chains, the quilted bags, the number 5 perfume. By the time she dies in 1971, the Chanel look is fully formed. Even if younger women don't always wear it, they know what it is. When Coco dies at the age of 87, in her apartment at the Ritz, she leaves no clear successor. Over the 1970s, a series of designers take over different branches. Yvonne Dudel and Jean Casaubon for couture, Philippe Guy Bourget for ready-to-wear. The problem? There is no strong creative vision tying everything together. The couture often looks like watered-down versions of Coco's old work. The ready-to-wear sometimes feels too accessible, too commercial. By the late 1970s, Chanel clothes are no longer must-haves. Perfume and accessories, especially number 5, are basically keeping the brand alive. One powerful woman still wears Chanel a lot, Nancy Reagan. But that's not exactly making the brand feel young, edgy, or exciting. Chanel is in danger of becoming a dusty prestige label, respected but irrelevant. In 1983, Alain Wertheimer hires Karl Lagerfeld as artistic director of Chanel. Karl is not some random pick. By this point, he has worked for Balmain, Chloe, and Fendi. He's known for being incredibly productive, theatrical, and sharp-tongued. People warn him, don't touch Chanel, it's dead. You can't bring it back. Karl hears, challenge accepted. For his first couture collection, he doesn't blow everything up. He starts with respect. Tweed suits, pearls, quilting camellias. He takes the classic codes Coco built and tweaks them, making jackets a bit sharper, skirts a bit leaner, styling a bit more modern. Critics love it. They say it feels like Chanel, but refreshed. Old clients? Some are offended. They think it's too modern, too loud, too far from Coco's austere elegance. Karl doesn't care. He's not here to run a museum. He's here to make people want Chanel again. Karl takes over ready-to-wear, reintroduces and reimagines the 2.55 bag, and, importantly, turns the double C logo into a full-on graphic icon. If Coco liked understatement, Karl likes spectacle. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, he piles on chains, pearls, and logos, shows neon, miniskirts, sheer fabrics, body-hugging dresses, mixes streetwear energy with couture references. He pulls heavily from Black American street style at times, oversized chains, sporty shapes, exaggerated silhouettes, then translates it into luxury, mostly for rich white customers. Criticism later points out how uncomfortable and exploitative that can be, but in the fashion world of that era, it's seen as inspiration. Either way, the effect is clear. Chanel looks alive again. He builds a Chanel girl universe with supermodels as muses: Claudia Schiffer, Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, Kate Moss, Devon Aoki. He's not just designing clothes, he's creating imagery that spreads through magazines, campaigns, and runways styled like big-budget theater productions. By the 2000s, Chanel shows feature full-size supermarkets, airports, beaches with real sand rocket launches. Whether people like the clothes or not, everyone is talking about Chanel. While all this is happening on the runway, Chanel is becoming a character in pop culture. In Sex and the City, Samantha and later Carrie wear Chanel, signaling status and sophistication. In the OC, Marissa Cooper's wardrobe puts Chanel jackets and bags into teen fantasy land. In The Devil Wears Prada, Chanel boots and coats are shorthand for "you finally made it into the fashion world." Later, in Gossip Girl, Chanel appears regularly as part of the fantasy of being young, rich, and dramatic in New York. Karl also chooses powerful actresses as ambassadors: Nicole Kidman for Chanel No. 5, Keira Knightley for Coco, Mademoiselle Audrey Tautou, starring in Coco before Chanel later, Kristen Stewart, Blake Lively, Lily Rose Depp, Margot Robbie, and others. This strategy works. For millennials and early Gen Z, Chanel is no longer something only old rich ladies wear. It's that brand from movies, series, ads, and red carpets. But under the surface, things get messy. Karl himself becomes controversial for his comments. He mocks women's bodies, calling critics fat mummies with bags of crisps, makes remarks dismissing the broader Me Too movement, poses Claudia Schiffer in racialized imagery that reads as yellowface and blackface in a 2010 shoot. At the same time, his designs start feeling repetitive. For decades, his genius was taking the Chanel codes and remixing them. But by the 2010s, some collections look like yet another tweed suit, yet another embellished jacket, yet another logo slingback. Meanwhile, Gucci, Balenciaga, and Prada are pulling younger consumers in with riskier designs, memes, and unexpected collaborations. Chanel tries to stay premium, dignified, eternal. But eternal starts edging into boring for a lot of people. Sales of bags, perfume, and cosmetics are still strong. Clothing, less so. Karl passes away in February 2019 after more than 30 years at the brand. His final collection feels like a farewell, a heavy emotional runway that doubles as a tribute. After Karl's death, his longtime right-hand Virginie Viard takes over as artistic director. On paper, she's the logical choice. She's been at Chanel since 1987. She knows the studio, the archives, and the codes by heart. Her first collections are quiet, very quiet. The intention seems to be, let's go back to Coco. Let's strip it down. Let's be subtle, understated, chic. The problem is that subtlety can easily slide into forgettable. Season after season, critics and fans start saying, everything looks the same. Where's the excitement? This feels like Chanel on autopilot. On red carpets, Chanel ambassadors often become Twitter's favorite punchline. Actresses like Kristen Stewart, Margot Robbie, and Penelope Cruz get stuck in looks that are technically Chanel, but feel stiff, overworked, or just off. Then there's the newer ambassadors. Whitney Peak, mainly known from the Gossip Girl reboot, Margaret Qualley, Lily Rose Depp, Jenny Kim, etc. They're young, pretty, and perfectly styled, but many feel like mannequins for the brand rather than true muses with distinctive personal Chanel interpretations. The aura changes from, "I am a Chanel woman," to "I am being used by Chanel for marketing." One of the biggest criticisms Chanel faces in recent years is this: the prices keep going up, the quality, not so much. Let's look at the classic flat bag as an example. In the 1950s, it cost about $220, roughly $2,500 in today's money. In the 1980s, around $1,000, about $3,700 today, still aligned with the idea of lasting quality. Between 2014 and 2022, the price jumps from roughly $4,400 to about $8,800, pretty much double in under a decade. At the same time, buyers complain about thinner leather, cheaper feeling hardware, less careful finishing. Some speculate Chanel wants to become more like Hermes. Fewer products, higher prices, more exclusivity. The problem is Hermes bags are known to be extremely well made and often hold or increase in value. With modern Chanel, many people feel like they're paying for the name, not the craftsmanship. Then there's the infamous Chanel Advent Calendar scandal of 2021, a super expensive, hyped-up calendar that turned out to be filled with stickers, dust bags, and random little trinkets. Social media dragged it for days. For a lot of younger luxury customers, that moment summed up how the brand feels now. All branding, not enough substance. So where does that leave us? Chanel is still one of the most recognizable fashion brands in the world, a giant in perfume, beauty, and accessories, deeply embedded in the history of 20th century women's fashion. It revolutionized how women dress, how they move, how luxury can look simple instead of overloaded, but it also carries the unresolved weight of Coco's Nazi collaboration, an often sanitized, romanticized official narrative, a growing gap between its myth and its current output. Right now, many people feel Chanel is stuck, too scared to truly evolve, too dependent on its old codes, too eager to raise prices without matching value. It's still aspirational. But it's also increasingly questioned. Chanel is a paradox. It's the brand that freed women from corsets and then later sold them a fantasy of perfect, controlled elegance. It's the brand that gave us the little black dress, number 5, tweed jackets, and shoulder bags that changed handbag history. It's also the brand whose founder tried to use the Nazi regime to seize back business control from Jewish partners. It's a house reborn by a designer who turned it into a pop culture empire, then stayed long enough for his own work to feel repetitive and out of touch. And now, it's a brand trying to survive in an era where TikTok unboxings, quality complaints, and price rants can go viral in a matter of hours. So the real question is, will Chanel reinvent itself again, the way Coco did, the way Carl did, or will it slowly become the fashion version of a museum gift shop? Expensive, iconic, but ultimately more nostalgic than necessary? Let me know what you think. Would you still save up for a Chanel bag today? Do you think the brand deserves its iconic status? And which era of Chanel, Coco's, Carl's, or now, do you think truly represents the essence of the brand? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the glamorous and messy history of Chanel, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which fashion house you want me to dissect next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. These screws get hotter and fuse faster than your ex on a rebound.